Coming in. Good morning. I'm Reverend Mary Murray Shelton. I'm the senior minister here at Golden Gate Center for Spiritual Living, and I am delighted to welcome everybody this morning on this Memorial Day weekend. If you are with us for the very first time this morning, I just want you to know, whoever you are, wherever you may be on your pathway of faith, you're welcome here. We're delighted that you're here. Because it's a holiday weekend and some people are away, we have empty seats sprinkled through the room. So I'm going to invite you to do something that you don't like to do. I'm going to invite you to move forward. So if you're at the back, I see you. And want you to move forward. There you go. That's great. There are some empty seats. This whole second row is empty up here. And I can't bite you all the way over there. So come forward, please, please. It would make me feel so much better to look out there and see people in that row. Thank you. I know this is not anybody's favorite thing to get shuffled up on Sunday morning. Thank you so much. So because today is moving us into Memorial Day weekend, and because we don't have slides this morning, now something wonderful is happening so that we will have them again. What's happening is that the community center has purchased a new projector and a new screen, and it's going to be rear projection, which I think may make the slides show up better and not be as affected by the light. I'm not sure, we'll see. But while they're in the process of doing that and have not had a chance to train us yet on how it works, we don't have it this week. So what you have is me. I am the whole visual aid, so I will do my best to be entertaining up here for you this morning so that you can stay focused. This month of May, we've been talking about compassion and support for the poor, using that word poor in a variety of understandings of the experience of lacking something in life that we want or need. And so because this is Memorial Day weekend, you can see that we have an altar here that honors those who are veterans, who have passed. And so if you served in the military, or if you were the spouse of someone who was serving in the military while you've been married, or if you are the child of someone who was serving in the military as you were growing up, would you stand up? So I want to just take a moment to honor all of you whose families, spouses, parents have supported the United States in this way, because we know that it's the service people and also their families who make a sacrifice in moving all over the place, in serving all over the world, and going into all kinds of situations that we can't even imagine. So we honor you today. We thank you. And we pass on this thanks to those who have served and who died in the service of their country. Thank you. Because today is Memorial Day and it's Memorial Weekend, I shared with you last week that when I was a child, Memorial Day was a time when we went to the cemetery every year, because my father died just after I turned 3, and I had grown brothers, and we had other relatives that had passed. And so every year on Memorial Day, we would gather flowers, particularly from my one brother's yard. We would gather flowers and we would go out to the cemetery. They would make a ritual of trimming around the headstones, whisking it off with a whisk broom, wiping it down with a wet paper towel, placing the flowers, and then, being the good Catholics that we were, we would all kneel down and say prayers there every year. So while I was growing up, that was a familiar thing. And what we did not do this year on Valentine's Day is we did not do a special honoring of those who have lost their spouses or significant partners to death. And I want to do that this morning. But I want to talk a little bit first before I do that. So how many of you are avid golfers out there? We have a few avid golfers. Okay, this may make sense to the rest of you or not. A couple of guys playing one day at their local golf course. One of the guys is about to chip onto the green, and he sees a long funeral procession going around the golf course. And he stops in mid-swing, he takes off his golf cap, closes his eyes, and bows in prayer. And his friend says, "That is the most thoughtful and touching thing I've ever seen. You are such a kind man." He said, "Yeah, well, we were married for 35 years. We all grieve in our own ways, you know. When someone that is very dear to us passes, and we prepare a ceremony of remembrance, whatever kind that we do, whatever our tradition is, the ceremony of remembrance there's so many mixed emotions in that experience. And when I'm meeting with a group of people to do a memorial or a funeral service, and I feel like this would be comfortable for them, I share this story from Ram Dass, who was talking to one of his mentors once and said, "What should I tell people about death?" And his mentor said, "Tell them it's perfectly safe. Tell them it's like taking off a tight shoe. It's like being at a party where a lot of people are talking loudly and smoking and stepping outside for a breath of fresh air." Now, the reason I like to share that story is because I don't think that death needs to be a scary thing for us to look toward, that we're going to go through that experience, any more than birth, in retrospect, seems scary. There are moments when it can be scary, when it's happening to you or when you're giving birth, and there can be births that are tragic or difficult. But birth, we all did it. Somehow or other, we all did it. And when it comes to the other end of this vehicle, we will do a different kind of birth. We came in, we go out. And so some years ago, I was on Vashon Island for a conference with a group of people. And Robert Theobald, who had been a member of this group on Whidbey Island, had been a part of the group. And Margaret Wheatley was a friend of his. And he had died recently, and she wrote this for him. And I love this poem. So when certain fellows pass, I feel that this is an appropriate reading to honor them. It's called "When an Old Dragon Dies." When an old dragon dies, the earth does not go quiet. The great voice he could not silence reverberates from high mountains and insists on its vibration. When an old dragon dies, the earth does not grow dark. The crystal dreams he chose never to deny gleam on great waters and shine into the universe. When an old dragon dies, the earth does not grow cold. The fiery vision that birthed his fierceness flames out across the sky and sets the frozen air on fire. Earth becomes too small for dragons. Clutching greatness, they must flee its bounds. But we are still here. Let us not mourn too long his going. Let us mourn only those moments of distraction or fear that prevent us from following his unerring flight into the realm of dragons. That to me is such an honoring of a great soul going on. Would you agree? Yeah, that was not a rhetorical question. Would you agree? Yes? Yes, I think so. It says something for a life that we know, that we treasure, that we love. Many years ago, one of my board members had a beloved son who was dying of AIDS. And I often find that when there is a process to their dying, when it isn't sudden, when it's coming and people know it's coming, that sometimes what we experience or observe is that the person who's getting ready to make that transition spends time with one foot on each side of the veil. And so sometimes they say things or refer to people or talk to people or pets or something that we don't see or experience at all. And a medical profession might be that that's just, the delusional brain of somebody who's on a lot of medication or who's going. But at the same time, it's very interesting who shows up and what they see and how they speak about it. So her son would sometimes kind of go into a reverie where he wasn't quite present. And at one point after that had happened for a while, he came to himself and he said to her, "I'm so fascinated. I've been watching these people and they're building something." And she said, "Who are they?" he said, I don't know, but they're nearly finished. And what that said to me was it was a metaphor for his process, what he was moving toward, his life ending and him moving on to some other home, that this group of people was preparing for him, and he was fascinated watching them do it. So these kinds of things I find comforting, thought-provoking, touching. And when we lose people in this way, when we lose someone, whether it's a person, a spouse, a relative in the military, or a pet, when there is a dear one who goes on, it's different from being estranged. Those of you that are parents might recognize this. When my son was in high school and he wasn't in the house, he was still present in the house. When he moved back to Washington to go to college, it was different. He wasn't present in the house energetically. Does this make sense? Yes? And with people who have died, there is a space that's left because their presence isn't in our life, in our home anymore. There is a space that's left, but that space is like a presence. That space remains, and no one else can fill it, and it does not go away. Will Smith said this on Oprah in 2008, and I really appreciated this. He said, there's such a concept of loss and how we relate to loss. We think of things in a straight line, birth, life, death. That's not really how it works. You take those ends and you bend it into a circle so that it's birth, life, death, rebirth. So you have to be prepared when you lose something, when you go through a divorce, when your mother dies, when you lose your house. You have to understand that nature has it no other way. There is a rebirth. The death is painful. It doesn't change the pain of the death, but you got to stay awake and stay focused for what's the rebirth that God is about to offer you. When a spouse dies, when a partner that we have shared years and life with dies, they are not the only one that makes a transition. We make a transition too. And it's a transition into a life that we did not necessarily choose to have come next, that we're not necessarily prepared for, and yet we have no choice. It's like graduating from, middle school or junior high and going on to high school. You, barring certain circumstances, you can't go back and spend the rest of your life there in junior high. You have to go on. You don't have a choice about that. Well, when this person goes on in our lives, something profound changes, and we change as a result of that. And it isn't something that we can choose not to have happen to us. Because even if we spend the rest of our life at home grieving, we are changed. Our life is changed. And we have to choose then to go forward. What's next? What are we still here about? It takes at least a year, most of the time, for people who are grieving the loss of a partner or spouse. And I would say that seems kind of short to me, really. Because that space, it just goes on. There was a woman in our congregation in Santa Rosa a number of years ago who had a very dear friend who died in the earthquake in about 1987, whenever it was, when the freeway collapsed. Remember that? And a year later, after that had happened, she came up to me after a service on Sunday morning and she said, I am so angry with him. And I said, tell me about that. She said, well, it's been a whole year that he's been dead. When is he going to get over it? And she knew that didn't make any sense logically, but that is how we feel inside. Like this relentless absence of this person, this has to end. They have to be back in the circle again. And so when we look at bless you, when we look at making a new relationship with the person who has passed, we have to move through the grieving process of letting go of their physical presence, the sound of their voice, the smell of their clothing, the way that they touch us, the kind of food they used to prepare for us to share, if they did that. All of those sorts of things are not now a part of this relationship that still exists, but it's in a completely different form. And for a long time, it's hard for us even to make a space to access it because it's such a different relationship than what it was. So we not only, in a sense, lay them to rest at that time when they release their spacesuit, this physical form, when they trade it in for something else. But we also must rest in the heart of that divine compassion. We really need that. We need that divine compassion. You know, if you've gone through a period of intense grieving yourself, you know that when that happens, you may find that you can't eat. You can't really sleep. And when I got a divorce, that's probably the nearest thing that I had to that kind of a loss. And I remember thinking, if I can eat 2 bites, at least I have some nourishment. So I'll just always try to eat at least 2 bites. If I can't go to sleep, what I know is that if I close my eyes, it will change my brain waves. So I will get some kind of rest, even if I can't sleep. There were times during that, and I was in the school of ministry then, there were times during that where I would find myself at work and I couldn't remember how I got there. I actually, at the computer one day, looked down to make sure I was dressed because I couldn't remember putting my clothes on that morning. When grief breaks into our experience, and it does when something significant has to be released, when grief breaks through into our experience, it scrambles us. It scrambles us physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, in every conceivable way. It scrambles us. How many of you have had somebody near you, close to you, die? Okay, so that's almost unanimous. So I think you have some idea, yes, what I'm talking about? In this experience? The brain gets fuzzy. It can't be relied upon. Emotions are uncontrollable, and they show up at times you least expect it. And that is what we need in order to process grief. We need that mourning. We need that active releasing. We need to talk about the person that we let go of. So one of the things that I suggested that we do today is that we invite those who have lost a spouse or partner to put pictures and mementos of them up on the altar today. And we have some military ones as well, which is great. If you brought photos or mementos of someone and you haven't had a chance to put them on the altar, do it now. Come on up and do that now if you have things with you. Because we want to hold these folks and their partners and their loved ones in our hearts today, and we're going to do a special ritual for them. So let me grab my notes for this part. So if you are a widow, a widower, or someone who lost your significant person, even if you weren't formally married, would you please come forward? Don't be shy. Come right on up here. And now, for each one of you, I'm going to give you one of these to hold. There we go. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to honor those who have passed in a particular way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the microphone to each one of you in turn, and I'm going to ask you to say the name of your beloved and how long it's been that they've been gone, and then tell us something special about them, something special to you. It can be something funny. It can be something that irritated you to pieces. Whatever comes to mind, tell us a special memory of that person. So their name, how long it's been since they passed, and something special about them. Shall I start with you, Jet? Can you do it? Microphone.
Bill Walker.
Make sure the microphone's on.
Is it on?
Can you? Okay, good.
Okay. Bill Walker, he died 2.5, almost 3 years ago, although he checked out very early because he had 16 years of Alzheimer's. So it was a very, as Nancy Reagan said, a long goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
And but he was funny. And when he was in college and law school, they used to call him Motor Mouth. And he didn't stop talking even when he had no idea what he was saying.
Jim Malloy, he passed away approximately 10, 11 years ago. And very nice man. I loved him so much.
And pretend that this is like what would you eat that way? Maybe a what would you put in your mouth that way? Anyway, hold it this way. A lollipop, because the top of it is where the sound goes in, not the sides. So if you hold it this way, it doesn't really help. You got to hold it that way.
My name is Ron Buck, and Lynn Salop, Catherine Buck, my wife for 35 years, passed 11 years ago from breast cancer, and she was the goddess of Mother Earth.
Mm.
She was unique and my personal pit bull.
Ah.
Gene Langell, and he passed away just a little over a year ago. And of course, it's the year. I can't believe it's been a year. It's gone so quickly.
Oh, there we go. Much better.
Yeah, and it's taken. When you mentioned a year, it takes about a year to get over the worst of it. And you know, I find that I'm alone a lot. You know, because he was just always there. I mean, we did everything together for 60 years. And, I mean, you just, you know, you just miss that. But I am adjusting to it. And I'm really feeling that I don't mind being alone. And, in fact, I rather am getting to like it. And so, anyway, he was a great personality and always so upbeat and just, you know, very positive. And so I still, you know, I will forever miss him, of course. But anyway, that's the way it goes.
My husband's name was Tom Roby. We were together 36 years. He died 18 years ago, so it's been a while. But my experience was very different than many people who lose someone, because he didn't leave, literally. He died in his sleep overnight, unexpectedly, at home in bed. And so I went through that. But about a week later, he was back, his spirit, his essence, in the apartment that we had shared for quite a long time there. And he was just there in a loving, warm way, which he had been with me our whole life together. And very, very gradually after that, always being there, he started slipping away by choice. But he simply didn't want to leave. There's free will on the other side. He and I had talked a lot about what would happen after one of us dies and what's over there. So it was just an open topic for us. And I always and will always feel his love and protection. And I thank him for that.
My name is Jerry Haas, and I lost my wife 20-some years ago. We were married for about 13 years.
What was her name, Jerry?
Her name was Ruth Ross, and she was an author. She wrote Prospering Woman, and through her, I met so many wonderful people, and she died of a stroke. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to have each one of you choose a stone. One of the things that has marked Amanda's and my relationship over the last number of decades has been that anytime we've been where there were stones or a beach or something, her eyes just recognized stones that are shaped like hearts. And so very early on in our relationship, when we would take walks, she was always handing me stones. And I collected them. So these are some of them. And I want to give each one of you a stone that's shaped like a heart, because this is enduring love. So please choose a stone. You can move them around if you want to see what's under there. All right, and now finally, I'd like to, well, it's almost finally. I'd like to have you say some gift that you carry forward in your life because of your spouse. So I'll give you just a moment to kind of think about that. Something that they were or they taught you or that you took forward in terms of wisdom or awareness or behavior because they were a part of your life.
Well, what came to me in a moment's notice
Yes.
is Bill had a very rare blood type. And of course, it was perfect for him. It was B positive.
Oh! So that's your message. That's your message, yeah.
I like that. Jim had a wonderful sense of humor and really cared about people. I think you all would have liked him very much. I had him for a long time, 20 years.
It's a great thing to be able to carry something forward with you.
Lynn, tough as she was, her love for her family and children, I carry that forth to my grandchildren.
Oh, yeah.
What Ruth left me was just a bevy of many, many friends.
I thought of something and I forgot it. Well, actually, I think the spirituality of Gene was something that I knew about him when I first met him. And that was the one thing out of all the other kind of boyfriends that I had. The solidarity of a person who has that kind of background, comes from a spiritual family or has that belief in, a supreme being and all that goes with that. And all through our lives together, we were Baptists for a while, and we were Presbyterians for a while, and we moved around. And So, but it was always, we always had that foundation of a spiritual togetherness, you know, and that was really important to me.
My husband gave me the gift of ongoing, unconditional love from day one. That's a wonderful experience to have, and I still feel and will the rest of my life here embody the protective energy, the bubble that he wrapped around me that I still have to this day.
So what I often tell people at memorial services and funerals is that we have received something immaterial, something formless, that is a part of our inheritance from the person that we loved. And we are different because they were in our lives. So we carry something forward from them. And sometimes somebody comes into our life who needs that sense of humor or that positivity or that spirituality or unconditional love or fierceness or whatever it was. And in that moment, sometimes we receive the grace to know this is the moment for me to pass on or share this gift. Not that I have any less of it, but to share this gift with this other person. And I know that it's something that was a legacy from my loved one. So, you know, these folks have all had at least a year since their dear one passed and have begun to live their lives and go forward in that, with that space beside them. So I want to ask you guys, I'm going to read this first, and if it's okay with you, then I'm going to ask you to say it, and I'll lead you through it, and then congregation, I'm going to ask you to say something back to them. So this is what I'm going to invite you to say. I choose the life I have been given now, and I bless the name, my late husband or wife or partner, on their ongoing adventure. Do you feel comfortable saying that? Is that okay? Okay. So just say this after me. I choose the life I have been given now. And I bless the name of your person. My late husband, wife, whatever, whichever it is, and on his or her ongoing adventure. And now I want to invite you to say back to them. So all of you turn so you can see the congregation and they can see you. And I'm going to invite you to say to them, we see you. We hear you. We embrace and bless you. We are with you as you bless your late spouses on their way. Sorry about that. And choose the lives you've been given now. Yes. And so it is. And now I want to invite each of you to take the little candle you're holding and place it over there on the altar. And then you can be seated. And let us honor and acknowledge them and their loved ones. And so now it's our turn. Because we all have experienced some kinds of losses with dear ones in our lives, I invite you to bring to mind someone that you have known who has gone on. Could be a parent, could be a pet, it could be a friend. What is your inheritance from this person? What did you learn about yourself or about life or about them? What quality did they have that you admired or that drove you crazy? What is it that you are carrying forward because you knew them? How are you different? What do you miss about that person or that pet or that dear one? And what do you treasure about what you're taking forward? That is your inheritance. You see, the empty space that is created when someone goes is an energetic recognition of that they were here and that they made connections with us on earth, that we loved them, that they changed us, that their lives had meaning. Even if no one else ever knew they existed, the fact that we remember them with love opens that space beside us and reminds us that that space belongs to them somehow. And when we walk, that presence, that space is there beside us, whether other people can see it or not. This doesn't preclude loving others or falling in love with others or marrying others. It's not that. It's that they're dear and their dearness remains even though their physical presence doesn't. They're in a sense always there, like what Julie said. And so what did we learn about ourselves in the process of letting them go? When my mom died, now, it was very different between my mom and my dad. My dad was 50 years old. He died of a stroke. He was a heavy smoker. He'd had some strokes already, and he was gone. My mom she died the month she would have turned 83 years old. She had high blood pressure and angina, and she had breast cancer she'd recovered from, and So she was older, certainly, than my dad, and it was a different absence that I experienced with my mom than with my dad as a little tiny child. If you lose somebody when you're very little, you think about life and death differently, I think, than other people who haven't had that experience. You ask some questions differently than other people who haven't had that experience. And going forward in your life, that is a gift, in a sense, to take forward. So that's something I got to bring forward from my father's death. With my mom, what I discovered was I had never been that interested in displaying family photos, like, relatives. My own immediate family, yes. After my mom died, I took out all these old family photos, framed them, and put them all over the wall in the condo where I was living in Southern California, where I could look at them and see my family. Most of those people had passed that were on that wall, but that was my lineage for me to look at and see on the wall in front of me. I didn't realize that my mom, who was the linchpin that stayed connected to everybody, that desire to be connected to the lines of family actually lived in me in some fashion. And that's how it showed up after she was gone. But I didn't realize that I'd been given that gift until after she was gone. Can you relate to this? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Oh, Ernest Holmes said this about life and death and life after death. He said, and this is from 10 Ideas That Make a Difference, how impossible it is for us to believe that those whom we have loved and who have passed away are really dead. We do not think of them as dead at all. We think of them as living somewhere else, still conscious of themselves, still casting back occasional glances on our experience, and perhaps waiting for that time when we too shall join them. And in The Science of Mind, he says, I believe in the continuation of the personal life beyond the grave, in the continuity of the individual stream of consciousness, with a full recognition of itself and the ability to know and to make itself known. I wish to feel, when the experience of physical death shall occur, that which I really am will continue to live beyond the grave. So that's what our founder, Ernest Holmes, said about that. And John O'Donohue, who passed on not so long ago, wrote this, and I don't know if this was for his wife or for somebody else who was dear to him, but it's called On the Death of the Beloved. Though we need to weep your loss, you dwell in that safe place in our hearts where no storm or night or pain can reach you. Your love was like the dawn, brightening over our lives, awakening beneath the dark a further adventure of color. The sound of your voice found for us a new music that brightened everything. Whatever you enfolded in your gaze quickened in the joy of its being. You placed smiles like flowers on the altar of the heart. Your mind always sparkled with wonder at things. Though your days here were brief, your spirit was alive, awake, complete. We looked toward each other no longer from the old distance of our names. Now, you dwell inside the rhythm of breath, as close to us as we are to ourselves. May this dark grief flower with hope in every heart that loves you. May you continue to inspire us to enter each day with a generous heart, to serve the call of courage and love until we see your beautiful face again in that land where there is no more separation, where all tears will be wiped from our mind, and where we will never lose you again. The passing of those who are dear to us, it's not an event, it's a process. The actual passing, there may be a process to that, or it could be sudden, but their leaving us, for us here, is a process. When we look ahead to our own passing, when we consider what it might mean to have a good death, it's useful for us to think about what we have treasured that we want others to know that we feel about them. When I was the minister in Huntington Beach, our music director was dying, and we were, a whole bunch of us, in his hospital room with him one day. He was still lucid at that point, and he was a young man, and one of the things that he did was he went around the room and told every single one of us what he remembered about us and what he loved about us and what was special about that relationship that he had with us. And I don't even remember what he said. I just remember what a treasure the process was. Well, we don't have to wait to do that. I mean, you might not get a chance on your deathbed to go around the room and tell everybody who's there how much you love them, or maybe they've gone on, or they're not there, or you die suddenly, or whatever. Why not tell the people you love now what it is about them that you really treasure? What it is about them that has blessed your life? If you were to leave in the next moment after you told them that, what would you want them to know? Tell them now. Why wait? You might have more good stuff to tell them later. I want to conclude today by sharing this little story with you. People have been known to inherit valuables from deceased relatives, sparkling heirlooms, the family silver, works of art, outright cash. But Evelyn Ryan didn't leave her 10 children any of these things because she didn't have them to give. The best things she left us were the intangibles, like her sense of humor and her laughter, which still rings in my memory and, in fact, in my house. When my mother died, I inherited a bird, not a lightweight canary, but a foot-high African gray parrot who talks and laughs in the rich, gravelly voice of 85-year-old Evelyn Ryan. These days, I wander around in a T-shirt that says, "My mother went to heaven, and all I got was this lousy parrot." But this is only half true. There is nothing lousy about Clancy. My brothers and sisters and I bought Clancy to keep Mom company after Dad died. She picked him out from a group of baby parrots in a pet store. They bonded instantly, my gray-haired mother and this gray-feathered bird with a bright red tail. The summer before Mom died, I went home to Ohio for a 3-week visit. The first morning, I awoke to laughter and conversation coming from downstairs, and I wondered what fun-loving neighbor had dropped by. Once downstairs, I discovered that the source of all this joyful noise was simply Mom and Clancy going through their morning routine. He kept the conversation rolling, and his comments, with a voice identical to hers, had them both in stitches. "Where's my shoes?" he asked. She laughed and said that her shoes, not his, were lost. "Don't know where I put stuff," he said. They talked all day like this, taking turns, commenting on my mother's ragtime piano playing. "Isn't that pretty?" And on his backyard view of Mom's flower garden full of white hollyhocks and orange daylilies. "It's beautiful." They looked after one another, too. If either of them dozed off, the other would say, "You're so quiet. Are you okay?" Clancy learned every word and sentence from Mom. Of course. For years, she told him when the birds visited the backyard, "Look at all the little birdies." Or when the morning paper hit the front porch, "That was the paper boy." He learned to repeat those sentences when appropriate, but he can ad-lib too. "There's someone at the door," he said during my visit home. Hearing this, Mom walked out to the front door only to find no one there. "Now don't tell me there's someone there when they're not," she told him. "I went all the way out there for nothing." He waited just a beat to reply, "There's a little birdie at the door." My mother died at home after a 3-week illness, and Clancy was by her side the entire time. Near the end, the two of them had the best seat in the house in front of the double-wide open window in the bedroom where they could see the trees, birds, the tops of the ancient evergreens lining the front of the house, and the bell tower of St. Mary's Catholic Church just a block away. When the parish priest came to visit, Clancy was a surprise participant in the conversation, reducing what should have been a solemn event into unholy hilarity. Throughout the priest's booming recitation of the Lord's Prayer, Clancy shouted his own version, "Good heavens! Good heavens! Good heavens!" Those of us in the room somehow managed to stifle our laughter. But just as the prayer came to an end, and as Father Ed delicately placed a communion wafer in my mother's mouth, Clancy yelled, "Oh, shh!" Clancy's now 17 years old, and we've been together for the past 4 years. It took him many months to forgive me for not being my mother. Short of saying, "What have you done with her?" he let me know that I was not his first choice in companions. "No," he shouted whenever I came near him. "Don't you do it." He became an expert marksman, flipping sunflower seeds at me with rat-a-tat-tat precision and taking canopy-sized bites out of my kitchen cabinets. But time seems to have done its magic, and now we banter back and forth, just as he and Mom used to do. When the phone rings, he carries on his part of the conversation in the background. "Hello? Uh-huh. Okay. All right." When I eat, he says, "How's your food?" Several weeks ago, I dumped a basket of clean laundry on the floor to sort it, and he said, "Where's my shirt?" And best of all, 15 minutes into my first attempt at silent meditation in the living room, he called out from his cage in the kitchen, "You're so quiet, are you okay?" I miss my mother more than I can say, but her loss has been lessened somewhat by the appearance of this avian doppelganger in my life. I carry Evelyn Ryan in my heart, of course, and I always will. But I also suspect that she's still here, sitting up there on the perch underneath all those feathers. Our divine ones find ways, when we're able to be aware, of letting us know that they are with us and they love us. Recently, Amanda and I watched a movie about a woman with Alzheimer's and how her family was struggling with whether or not to keep her at home when her husband, who was greatly resisting that move, had a heart attack and died. And they had always had this funny thing in their relationship where she would say, "Oh, you turkey." To him, she'd just call him a turkey when he was kidding or goofing around or something. And one of the last scenes in the movie, I hate to ruin it for you, but I love this scene. One of the last scenes in the movie, her daughter is visiting her in a beautiful retirement home, and they're out in this wonderful garden, and she says to her daughter, "It's so beautiful here. Who lives here?" And her daughter says, "You do, Mom." And then a turkey, an actual turkey, walks across she has a locket, and her daughter opens the locket up so she can see the picture of herself and her husband. And she says to her mother, "Who is this, Mom?" pointing to her dad. And her mother, like a teenager, says, "Oh, that's my boyfriend. He's always hanging around the turkey." And when her daughter drives away from the retirement home, an actual turkey walks across the road in front of her, and she says, "Thanks, Dad." So on that note, I want to send you out with 2 reminders for this week. One, let the people you love know what they mean to you. And the other is, open yourself to opportunities for those that you have loved to say hi, how you doing, by showing up in some symbolic way in your life to let you know they're still around. Namaste.